Welcome to Author Mama, where you will get my first impressions of every book I review. Today's book, Under the Midnight Sun by Tracie, Peterson, and Kimberly Woodhouse. So I'm on chapter 26, just starting chapter 26. And what this book reminds me of right now, it just kind of hit me. Do you have a question? Do you have a question?
No, I was trying not to interrupt you.
Okay. What this book reminds me of right now is a soap opera. There's a lot of characters in here, and they kind of try to incorporate in one big family, so they are, which doesn't bother me. I like lots of characters. But I think that's what some of the repetition reminds me of. There's a lot of repeating of information. It sort of feels like there's a couple little like dun 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 at the end of the chapter. You're like, so. And then the next chapter, you think it sort of gets you like, okay, it's gonna speed up a little. And then the next chapter, it just kind of falls off, and then it kind of starts over and builds you up again a little bit, and then falls off, and then builds you up a little bit. So it just reminds me of a soap opera. The end is near. The end is in sight. It should be just one big old climax and then resolution, but the resolution sort of anticlimactic. Maybe I want them to draw out the problem a little bit more so it actually feels like a problem, but it sort of feels like everything gets solved really fast, and then you're like, oh, so we're done with that. But I am reading more. It's towards the end. I'm getting a little bit more into it. Chapter 26. I am getting more into this book. There's absolutely no character development for the mother's change of heart. But I'm 2 pages away from the epilogue, which is good. Because I was about to say maybe I shouldn't read the rest of this book. But now I have to do it on principle. All right, so let's start. Where to start? Tracie Peterson wrote, and Kimberly Woodhouse wrote this series, The Heart of Alaska. This was not the only series, I don't believe, that they wrote together. Well, it might be the only series they wrote, but they also wrote All Things Hidden and Beyond the Silence. So I don't know how you co-write a book. What are the rules for that? Do you make them up as you go along? Do you like give each other certain things to do? Like one person does research, one person does like the actual dialogue and the writing, so I'm not sure. Looking up Kimberly Woodhouse, she was one of the authors in the Daughters of the Mayflower series, and it seems like that was also a co-effort. So within the Daughter of the Mayflower series, there was like different authors wrote each like a different like standalone book. I don't think they co-wrote a book, but I sort of did a compilation. One of the other authors was Michelle Grip. Now, when I looked up Kimberly Woodhouse, some of the reviews, and I don't remember which book I looked up. Oh, I think the one she wrote for the Daughters of the Mayflower. It said, too religious, too juvenile, little historical content, a teenage novel. So I don't know what part she played with Tracie Peterson. It doesn't sound like I would want to read one of her books, but that is just one review, so I don't really know. I have been interested in looking at the Daughters of the Mayflower series, so I still may yet. I've wanted to read Michelle Grip, if I'm saying that right. So anyway, you might wonder why I'm reading Under the Midnight Sun when this is the 3rd book in the series. So I went to the library, went to the Friends of the Library bookstore, and I saw this book, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. Look at this cover, how nice. So I bought the 3rd book, just on faith, went over into the bookstore, or into the library, borrowed the first 2 books, and brought them home. So before I even got around to the 3rd one, I started to read the first one. I read maybe 5 chapters of the first one, and then stopped. The second one, I started to read it, and then didn't get past the first chapter and stopped. Skimmed a little, still stopped. And then I looked up my 3rd one and put it on my glass table and used it as cup rest. Boop. Just like this. The reason I didn't like the first book was because honestly it just didn't, the plot was given to you within like the the prologue. The prologue had the entire plot. You didn't even have to predict anything. It was just, it just spoke for itself. I mean, it opened up, so this isn't really a spoiler because, again, it's in the prologue. So there's two business partners, and they're climbing up Denali in Alaska. And while they're up there, there's like the rich, conniving business partner who wants to have full ownership of the company, and he wants to get rid of his partner. And so he talks all about how he's trying to find the right opportunity to kill him, and then to sort of not pin it on the guide, but make it so it seems like it was the guide's mistake, or just sort of have a witness there that a mistake happened, and so he wouldn't be found at fault. So it doesn't say how the murder happened at that point. It kind of left that off, but you knew that it happened. So then in the very next chapter, or chapter 1, the son of the business partner that died comes back to Alaska, or comes to Alaska, partly to be a guide for Denali, and then partly to figure out what happened to his dad, and to kind of face off with the guy that he felt dropped the ball, because the conniving business partner always told that son that it was because of this guy's incompetence. But it told, the book told, I mean, the plot was so laid out by the first 5 chapters that you know that the entire, like this, you knew everything you needed to know. Right, and I'm like, what are they going to talk about? We're just going to wait. We have to wait the entire book for the son of the dead guy to find out that the other business partner did it, when we, the reader, clearly already know that the business partner did it. And there's no other conflict, really, because he... I say that having read 5 chapters of the book. It's just a lot of nothing in between. So I skipped to the end, and I was like, all right, well, I'll figure out if the, like that one, there was one reviewer that said she'll skip to the last 10% of the book, and if it catches her attention, she'll go back and reread it. Well, I skipped to the last, and it, he was confronted by the jerk partner, who pointed a gun at them at one point and then confessed the whole thing. He was like, and I was the one who untied him from the rope, and there was the storm, and my hands got cold as I took off my gloves. Just giving this detail that was just ridiculous. And so I just kind of laughed and set it aside. So then I get the second book, and I was kind of depressed. I was just depressed that I couldn't get through the first book. And so I just skimmed the second book, and basically a lot of letters were happening in the beginning, and there was info dumps within the letters. So those letters sounded unrealistic, because it's just the author trying to get across to the reader certain information, sort of disguised within a letter. But when one person knows something that another person knows, they don't talk to each other that way. So I just set it aside. I was like, forget it. And then I just looked at this book and said, forget it. But then when I started doing the reviews, I was like, you know what, I need to give it an honest chance. So I did make it to the end. Now, some of the things that I did not like right off the bat was that it opens up with a girl, and I think she's 13. My daughter is 13. But I could not relate to this little girl as 13. And I also couldn't relate to her having such romantic emotions or a crush on this boy who is older, like 16. Although, well, let me be realistic. I totally had crushes on boys when I was 13. I'm lying. Okay, so yeah, that could be a little bit realistic. Okay, so her brother has a friend. She adores her brother, and she adores the friend. And the friend admits that he adores her, and basically asks her to wait for him because they're going off to school. Now, I am scared of bears. They scare me. And bears are fast. So the first part of this book, she goes off and she's painting on some easel, and then she goes away from her easel, and she didn't bring her gun at 13, and she's off doing her thing. They're in the woods visiting. And this bear, this little baby bear comes out, and it specifically says, the baby bear and the mama bear are 10 feet away from where she is. And so she's like backing up slowly. But says Taylor slowly set down the easel and painting, hoping she would look less threatening to the animal. She backed up 2 steps with her hands out, 10 feet away, 2 steps. At the 2 more steps, but something rustled behind her. At the sound, Mama Bear charged toward Taylor. Before she could even think of what to do, Taylor screamed. A shot rang out and Taylor covered her mouth. The Mama Bear snorted in her direction, then swatted her little cub, and they took off at a fast pace away from where Taylor stood. And then Emerson was right there, and Emerson's like, are you okay? First of all, if a Mama Bear charged from 10 feet away, you would be dead. Like, just, maybe she just shouldn't have used the word charged. So I was like, that's not at all realistic. That's terrifying. Then it says that Emerson was trying to comfort her, but then she threw herself in his arms, sobbing, because he says, are you hurt? She goes, no, yes, I don't know, and he chuckled. And she says, it's not funny, Emerson, and you know it. And he says, oh, okay, Taylor, I'm not laughing at you, I promise. I guess I'm just surprised to see you crying. You've always been so fearless. We've seen plenty of bears before. He pulled her close, you know, and asking her again. And then she says, well, it's not all about, you know, it's not about the bear. Well, okay, maybe it was a little about the bear, but now I know it was you and your scent coming that made her charge. I should be upset with you. It was a ridiculous conversation. And it is about the bear. How could he say, I don't really understand why you're crying. You've seen bears before. Well, not charging at you from 10 feet away. That's across a room. It made such an impression on me when I read this that I dreamt about a bear chasing me and my children all throughout. I was trying to get them on a helicopter. It was like I was trying to get away, and it caught up. It was terrifying. It terrified me. And it was, I don't actually have a phobia about them or anything, but I just couldn't believe that she, like, who researched that part? Who researched the bear part? Kimberly or Tracie, one of you. Go back. Ask somebody about bears. Sorry. Okay. Now, that's the little girl scene where she's 13. Prologue. Next, chapter 1, she is an adult. Now, the writing was okay. Her actual writing is fine. Like, she can form a sentence. She, you know, she's got good thoughts. She's a very smooth writer. It's not that she can't write, it's that she writes things that are superfluous and that she regurgitates them. So that's the frustrating part about the writing. But she's easy to read. She's an adult in the next chapter. And there's a problem I have with Emerson is they make him very sweet in the prologue, so you actually kind of like him. You're like, oh, he's perhaps the love interest. But he's not. So that's fine. I don't mind twists. But then to hear he's such a jerk in the very next chapter as an adult, but she never tells you why. He just is. He's just unfaithful, and so does Wild Oats, and keeps, you know, he's very almost narcissistic, like treats her like, oh, come on, come around, you are gonna marry me, like, eventually, stop playing, you know, I'm sorry. Like, but they don't give you a reason for that change. They never build his character. They never explain his character. So you just are left with someone you liked and then left with someone you didn't. And there's no growth because they don't show you sort of the digression of his character, and then they don't really show you the progression either. He's got a tiny little inkling of a change of heart at the very end, sort of. The dialogue was fairly okay. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. In book 1, I did not like the dialogue. The main girl was just, she was supposed to be just very peppy, and always like positive, the glass is always half full, but she came across as very cliche, and it did not resonate with me. And I already talked about the ending where everything crescendos in a very poor way, anticlimactic way, but I already went over that and you would have seen that. So all in all, I did not like this book. I did not like this book. But I guess I can see why people might like it. Sometimes you don't notice. I think if you're used to lighter reading that you don't notice that information is being regurgitated. I think sort of the queen of that is, she's called the queen of Christian fiction. You know who I'm talking about? Everybody likes her. Queen of Christian fiction. Karen Kingsbury. That's it. I read a couple of Karen Kingsbury's books, and they're very popular. She's called the Queen of Christian Fiction. I read them, and it was a lot of regurgitated information. Kind of like what I'm doing. I keep bringing it up. Sorry. So, I think if you kind of like that lighter reading, then you would think Tracie Peterson is fine. She is, I think this could be a book for you. For 5 stars, it has 86%, 13% for 4 stars, and 1% for 3. So, 3 stars. Let's see. I've been reading Tracie Peterson books for about 20 years, and I've always found them to be really lovely books. And pairing her with other authors usually makes the stories even better. This book fell into the category of a well-written book, but while I did enjoy the storyline, I just couldn't connect with the characters. They didn't really come alive for me, and that made me sad, given the location and stories to be told. However, others may find that this book is perfect for them and enjoy it much more. Personally, I don't think this one will go on my reread shelf at all. Hopefully, future works by these 2 authors will be a better read for me. I would personally be interested in reading a book by Tracie Peterson that she did not co-author. I won't read another one by her and Ms. Woodhouse. Miss Woodhouse. That reminds me of the movie Emma. I think all the rest of these 4 and 5 star ones will just talk about how much they liked it. I'd say it just fell flat for me. I think you'll either like it or you won't. I don't think there's like that much to really criticize, although I probably did a fairly good job of that. So, sorry. So the next book that I'm going to read is called The Centurion's Wife. It is by Janet Oak and Davis Bunn. So I am going to try another co-authored book. I've never heard of Davis Bunn. I've read lots of Janet Oak. I love her, but I haven't read her books for a really long time. On the side, oh, here it is. I'm reading Dune. I've been trying to read Dune for like, I don't know, 5 years. I, right now, am this far. I'm editing, or loosely beta reading, catching for mistakes. A friend in my writers group, and she is writing a sci-fi, so I felt like I needed to get into the feel of a sci-fi genre, so I picked this up, and I was like, ugh. And that's how I felt when I first started reading it. I was so excited. I asked Aaron, my husband, please get me Dune, get me a really good sci-fi, I want to try to read sci-fi. And then I told my friend, and she said, why would you start with Dune? Now I know why she said that. So I'm gonna read Dune on the side. It might take me 5 more years before I can actually review it. But anyway, yeah, The Centurion's Wife, and catch you next time.